Iran's collapsing currency has ignited a third straight day of demonstrations. Officials say they are open to dialogue with protest leaders. But on the streets, the situation is already escalating. In Tehran, crowds have poured into the streets. What's unfolding feels like a clash between two realities. On one side, ordinary people are pushed to their limits, working an entire month just to afford a single gram of gold. On the other, a massive city of millions struggles with basic survival, where taps run dry and water has become as scarce as money. People aren't just lining up for bread. They're scrambling with containers in hand, trying to secure enough water for their homes. The pressure is no longer just economic, it's systemic. While officials argue and threaten action within their own ranks, the streets are sending a far louder message. Voices rise in unison, calling for everything to be shut down. This is no longer just a financial crisis. It's a moment that questions the very stability of the state itself. Water shortages, economic collapse, and weakening authority are converging into a single breaking point. To understand how things reach this stage, you have to look at what's happening on the ground. On December 30th, Iran declared a state of emergency in the heart of its capital, triggered by a level of panic rarely seen before. Daily life came to a standstill across key provinces like Tehran and Alborz. Government offices, universities, schools, and even the stock exchange all shut down. It was a drastic move that reflected a government struggling to maintain control. But it wasn't just institutions that stopped functioning. Authority itself began to slip. Verified footage from social media reveals a striking shift in power on the streets. Areas once tightly controlled by security forces are now being challenged openly. Protesters are no longer retreating. Instead, they sit in the streets, block roads, and confront security forces directly. In some cases, it's the police who pull back. At the center of this uncertainty lies a growing question about leadership. Reports suggest that Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has not appeared publicly for several days since the crisis intensified. The absence of clear direction has only deepened the sense of instability. As command structures weaken, confusion and disorder continue to spread. At the core of this crisis is a brutal economic reality. The national currency hasn't just weakened, it has lost much of its value. A single gram of gold in Tehran now costs around $140, while the official monthly wage for many workers is roughly $110. The numbers speak for themselves. For many, a month of work is no longer enough to secure even the most basic financial stability. What began on December 28, 2025, quickly grew into a nationwide wave of unrest. By the fourth day, protests had intensified, fueled by a collapsing exchange rate and rising costs. Markets reacted sharply. The Grand Bazaar in Tehran, long considered the economic heart of the country, shut its doors. This wasn't just another strike, it carried deep symbolic weight. As the currency lost value, import prices surged. Inflation climbed between 42% and 52%, while food prices rose by more than 66% in a single year. For merchants, business became nearly impossible. Losses mounted, and many chose to close their shops rather than continue operating under such pressure. Historic market areas fell silent. What started as economic frustration quickly turned into political expression. Protesters began chanting for freedom and an end to authoritarian rule. The movement spread beyond Tehran to major cities like Isfahan, Shiraz, Mashhad, and Kermanshah. University students joined in, adding their voices to the growing wave of dissent. The anger visible in circulating videos isn't driven by ideology alone, it reflects something more immediate and human. When survival becomes uncertain, reactions become instinctive. Students have been heard saying they would give their lives for their country, but insist that the current situation cannot continue. There is also a powerful historical echo. The same merchant class that once played a key role in the 1979 revolution is now stepping forward again, this time demanding change. Their calls to shut everything down signal a deeper shift, one that goes beyond protest and points towards systemic disruption. What's unfolding is no longer limited to a single city. The effects are spreading across the entire country, creating a chain reaction. With markets closed and supply lines disrupted, the economic system itself is beginning to fracture. This is not just a crisis centered in the capital. It is a nationwide breakdown, unfolding in real time. Trade between Tehran's warehouses and other cities has come to a standstill. This isn't just a disruption, it's a warning of what comes next. It means that when people walk into grocery stores, they may not find rice on the shelves. It means essential medicines could disappear. Iran depends heavily on imports for basic food and healthcare supplies. Without a stable currency, imports stop. When imports stop, shelves go empty. And when shelves go empty, the streets begin to fill. At the same time, cracks are forming within the security system. The images of police stepping back and retreating tell a deeper story. These officers are not separate from the people, they are part of them. They face the same rising prices, the same rent increases, and the same daily pressure to survive. Economic figures may exist on paper, but in reality this has become a raw fight for survival. Iran is not only losing the value of its currency, it is losing access to life's most basic necessities. Water and food are no longer guaranteed. The crisis unfolding in Tehran is no longer about financial charts or statistics. It has become something far more human, where families struggle to secure even the most basic needs. A mother cannot provide water for her child. A father cannot bring food home. What began as a water shortage is now spilling into chaos, even in places where people once waited calmly for bread. Government responses have only deepened public frustration. Officials appear on television suggesting people purchase water, but the reality is harsh. With what money? In a country where oil revenues have diminished and foreign currency is scarce even on informal markets, the idea of importing solutions feels detached from reality. This growing scarcity has shattered the unspoken agreement between the people and the state. For years there was a fragile balance control in exchange for stability. Now that balance is gone. People no longer believe the system can protect them or provide for them. And when fear collides with hunger, fear loses. That is the moment every government fears most. The unrest on the streets has now reached the inner circles of power. What began outside has moved inside, triggering internal conflict. Key officials are stepping down. Others are calling for dialogue, while some openly threaten each other in public. Political divisions are no longer hidden. They are playing out in front of the nation. This isn't just disagreement. It's a system turning on itself. The reason behind this internal collapse is simple. There is no money left. Billions in expected oil revenue have vanished. And officials are now openly accusing one another of corruption and mismanagement. State funds are being drained just to pay salaries. The pressure is closing in from all sides, leaving leadership with fewer and fewer options. What emerges is not just a struggling government, but a system that has lost its foundation. On one side, the currency continues to lose value at a dramatic pace. On the other, massive financial gaps remain unexplained. The crisis is no longer just economic. It reflects deeper administrative and structural failure that can no longer be hidden. Across markets and commercial centers, the sound of shutters closing has become a symbol of this collapse. Businesses are shutting down, not out of choice, but out of necessity. And this raises a critical question. How long can a police officer, whose own income has lost its value, continue to enforce order against people who share the same struggle? The greatest fear for those in power is not the size of the protests. It is the possibility that security forces begin to hesitate or refuse to act. Signs of that shift are already emerging. Even officials are beginning to express concern about public anger, acknowledging the risk of losing control. The impact is no longer limited to the streets. Industry is also grinding to a halt. Energy shortages and a lack of raw materials have brought production to a near standstill. But this crisis doesn't remain contained within national borders. It has wider implications. Some of these factories produce more than consumer goods. They are part of a supply chain linked to ongoing conflicts beyond the country's borders. As production slows and instability grows, those supply lines are disrupted. This creates ripple effects that reach far beyond Iran itself. For countries relying on this output, the situation is becoming increasingly uncertain. When a nation faces internal collapse, it cannot sustain external commitments. History has shown that when systems fail, their priorities shift inward. Resources dry up, logistics break down, and external operations become impossible to maintain. The reality is straightforward. A country struggling to keep its own economy running cannot reliably support operations abroad. Internal collapse inevitably weakens external influence. If we step back and look at the bigger picture, the crisis unfolding in Tehran is no longer just a domestic issue. It is part of a larger chain reaction. Economic failure leads to industrial shutdown. Industrial shutdown disrupts supply lines. And when supply lines break, the consequences extend far beyond one country. The deeper this crisis grows, the more its effects spread, reshaping not just the future of Iran, but influencing stability across an entire region and beyond. The Russian military relies heavily on drones along the Ukrainian front, deploying them in large numbers every single day. But this steady supply is fragile. It depends directly on the stability of the system inside Iran. And right now, that system is under immense pressure. The leadership in Iran is cornered, and this pressure doesn't stay contained within its borders. It extends outward, pulling others into the crisis. Among them is Vladimir Putin, whose strategy has become increasingly tied to Tehran's ability to maintain production and supply. As Moscow struggles in a prolonged and costly conflict, it now faces the possibility of losing one of its most dependable sources. This creates a dangerous strategic position, where even a small disruption can have major consequences. Then there's the question of other allies. As the crisis deepens, why have key partners, especially China, remained largely silent? The answer lies in interests, not alliances. China continues to benefit by purchasing Iranian oil at heavily discounted rates, taking advantage of the situation without stepping in to stabilize it. There is no large-scale investment to rebuild infrastructure or support struggling cities. Instead, the relationship appears one-sided, focused on gain rather than support. What may have once been seen as a strong alliance is starting to look more like dependence. While Iran positions itself as part of a broader resistance, in reality it is being used as a low-cost source of energy. Neither China nor Russia is making meaningful moves to reverse the collapse. Instead, they appear to be watching closely, calculating what remains worth securing. At the same time, external pressure is building again. With the possible return of strict economic policies from the United States, Iran faces a challenge it is far less prepared to handle than before. This time the country is weaker, economically drained, politically strained, and increasingly difficult to govern. Public frustration is no longer hidden. It is visible in the streets, growing louder each day. What makes this moment different is that the pressure is not only coming from outside. The system is straining under its own internal weight. Years of economic imbalance, mismanagement and unresolved tensions are now converging. Previous military actions have already weakened key structures. What were once small cracks are now widening into deeper fractures. There is also an environmental dimension to this crisis. Drying water sources and expanding salt storms are creating new challenges, affecting public health and forcing people to consider leaving their homes. This adds another layer of instability, turning internal problems into regional concerns. For years, external threats were used to unify and control public opinion. But that approach is losing its impact. When daily survival becomes uncertain, broader political narratives begin to lose meaning. People focus on immediate needs: food, water, and stability. There is a strong historical undertone to what's happening. Groups that once played a key role in shaping the country's past are now re-emerging with new demands. But this moment is not about repeating history, it's about confronting the present. The situation is approaching a decisive point. The signals are coming not from outside powers but from within, through protests, economic shutdowns, and growing public resistance. The closures of markets and the silence of once busy streets represent more than temporary disruption. They point to a deeper transformation. And if this collapse continues, its effects will not remain isolated. The consequences could extend beyond national borders, influencing both regional stability and global dynamics. Now it's your turn. What do you think about this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you want to stay updated with more in-depth analysis, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.